Thank you so much. All right, if you're excited about being here tonight, say aye.
Aye.
Fantastic. Ready to learn and grow, guys? Put your seatbelts on. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and jump in. You guys got the test menus. Pastor Mark, he requested that we put these out. I thought it would be a lot easier to address these things. There were a lot of questions regarding the panel. So if you did not get one yet, go ahead and raise your hand. So I think we do have some left. I'm not sure who was handing them out. So we'll try to get them to you. We're going to go ahead and print out some more. And we're going to go ahead and jump in. We got a lot of great information for you. Raise your hands if you learned anything last week. Glad you came. Okay, good. You came back. Raise your hands if you're here for the first time. Okay, wow, we have a lot of first-time attendees. So I'll try to do some rehash. We don't have time for much, but I'll do a little bit of rehash from last week. But we have a lot of new content. But here's the thing. If you're jumping in this week, you missed last week, this week's the first week, you're not coming in to the middle of the movie. Don't worry, because each week can almost stand alone on, by itself. So you're going to be okay. So let's go ahead and jump in. And, my purpose more than anything tonight is to honor the mighty man of God that leads this congregation, Pastor Mark. He invited me out here, and I want to honor him by just providing phenomenal information, knowledge that can improve the quality of life of every single individual sitting here. That's a good thing, yes? So that's what we're going to do. Okay, we're going to go ahead and jump in. Also, there was an overwhelming response last week. We didn't necessarily talk much about it, but a lot of people came up to us after Dr. Joe and myself were asking about, how do we get the test? How do we get an exam? How do we get our spines checked? How do we get this test or that test? We're going to talk more about that tonight. If you're looking for that opportunity, we're going to make it available for you. We wanted to at least show you up front what these tests are, what each test really applies to, what it's for. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, the pricing, so you guys know exactly what's involved with everything that we do. So let's go ahead and jump in. Is it important to have a big why as to why we're here? Everybody sitting here really is sitting here because of what reason? We want to be healthy. We want a greater quality of life. And what does a greater quality of life translate into? Why? Why is that so important? Live longer, feel better. Energy. How about serving the Lord? With more strength and more power, more energy and more gusto. We could do more. If we have better health, that's the whole point to it, is we can serve Jesus by serving our brothers and sisters. We can give more and live more and have a quality of life and just live our life on a much higher level. This is my family up there. I know I tried making the slides better. Maybe we can actually even dim down these lights and maybe a little easier, but that's my wife Mindy there, and Joseph, my 1-year-old, and Juliet, 6, Belle, who's 3. That's my team at home, and that's my little guy right there, and that's my big why. That's why I work on my health every single day. I want to be everything I can for them, and raise your hands if you know that you need a lot of energy for kids and grandkids, yes? No one ever told me that I would need so much energy and health to keep up with them. So right now I'm keeping them winded. They're still chasing after me. Hopefully that'll last for a while. So, but we do need to start with our big why, asking, why are we here? Why are we dedicating, for some of you guys, 4 weeks in a row to coming here, learning, growing, trying to implement, maybe getting tests, maybe getting checked? There's got to be an overall why behind what you're doing, the amount of time that you're investing. Some of you guys are taking away time from family, from valuable things. So making sure that you're identifying that. Uh-oh. Whoa. Oh. Wow. It was working there for a second, but I may have hit something. Who knows? Ah. Thank you, Jesus. Okay. So I know it's a little tough to see. I'm not sure if we can dim the lights over here. That would be great. Would that help, guys, if we dim the lights a little bit? Okay. So we talked about last week, for those of you guys who were here, we gave an analogy and a metaphor regarding the fireman and the carpenter. Who here remembers that? Right? So what was that metaphor? What was that analogy about? What was it about? Who can tell me? That's right? So we talked about, exactly. We talked about, hey, if a house is burning down, you don't call a carpenter, you call a fireman. If someone has 190 blood pressure or 250 blood pressure over 190, You don't bring them to a chiropractor. You bring them to the emergency room, right? They need emergency care. They need drugs. They may need surgery. They may need something emergency-wise, something to put the fire out. But then there's the carpenter that shows up after the fire has been put out, and the carpenter is more about rebuilding, rejuvenating, revitalizing, and really getting to the root, building up what's kind of in rubble, sort of say, right? So there's a time and a place for both, right? We established that. So you can't be anti-drugs and anti-surgery and all that because that saves lives. But also, there's a time to say, okay, that got me out of the pit that I was in or the crisis that I was in. Now, how do I actually get my body functioning and working well enough where it's healing well and I can stay well, I can have energy, and maybe with minimal amount of chemicals, minimal amount, or maybe no chemicals, no pharmaceuticals, maybe what have you, without additional future surgeries or drugs. So what we're looking at right here, the side effects of blood pressure medications, CCBs, calcium channel blockers have over a 26% increased risk of having a heart attack when you prescribe those. Now, again, not saying that in emergency situations they can't help, but long term, most of these drugs, or hardly any drugs at all on the market, were ever designed for long-term usage, with the exception of course, if you've had like a thyroid removed, an organ removed, and you need the medication to keep you alive long-term for the rest of your life. What the pharmaceutical companies have done in a phenomenal way, they have actually created these designer lifestyle drugs. And they've been able to really keep people on drugs far longer than they really were necessary to be on. So what it looks like right here, 26% increased risk of, I'm almost scared to hit the wrong thing. Okay, there we go. 26% increased risk of having a heart attack and or heart failure on these drugs. Does that sound dangerous? So these are really common ones. Some of these have been updated. CCBs are expensive, useless, and a blatant danger, and that's been said by the medical associations as well. The side effects of these medications are constipation, headache, palpitations, dizziness, rash, drowsiness, flushing, nausea, and swelling in the feet, lower legs, edema. So again, can they be life-saving? Of course they can. But long-term, can they actually potentially be creating some of the health problems, the sickness and disease that some of you guys are experiencing right now? Is that possible? Absolutely, right? So beta blocker drugs, everybody here has probably heard of that, diuretics, they raise your insulin level. Now, what happens if your insulin levels are raised abnormally and kept elevated for long periods of time? What can happen? Which disease can develop? Diabetes, of course, right? So you have here, and then of course with increased insulin is a growth hormone. It's not only involved with sugar metabolism, but it's also growth hormone, so you're going to gain weight, and it's also going to certainly accelerate the aging process. So diuretics also are given typically in this scenario. They also trigger diabetes. One of the things they do is they elevate homocysteine. Homocysteine is very inflammatory for the vascular system, so the arteries get inflamed, and that could actually lead to atherosclerosis, arteriosclerosis, hardening, and clogging of the arteries. So these drugs, long-term, can be very dangerous. Low cholesterol, and this is something we're really going to hit on tonight pretty hard. The body needs cholesterol, so let's just start there. Everybody here knows that the liver manufactures cholesterol, right? And what happened years ago, probably roughly 30 or 40 years ago, they came out with the whole cholesterol thing, right? The whole cholesterol scare. And what happened right around that time, everybody switched from butter to what? Margarine. And everybody was told, don't eat the egg yolks when you go to the omelet line at the hotel. Make sure you tell them that you just want egg whites, right? And so I had all this kind of mythology, I call it, this medical or nutritional mythology that formed and started really consuming the public, and it became the prevailing mindset that you had to be scared of cholesterol, and it's just not the case. Cholesterol is crucial for brain health. Almost the entire mass of the brain is made out of cholesterol. Cholesterol is crucial to make bile salts, to break down fat when you eat fat. Cholesterol makes every hormone in the human body, and you'll see this in a little bit. We're going to actually show you how the hormones are made. Every single hormone in the human body requires cholesterol. In fact, the bad LDL cholesterol makes every hormone in the human body. You need cholesterol to make vitamin D. Every single cell in the human body, actually the cell membrane is made out of cholesterol. Cholesterol is incredibly important. Now, you remember from last week, if you were here, we talked about inflammation. And we talked about the 3 T's, the 3 stressors. Can anybody here recall what those 3 T's, the global forms of interferences or triggers that create interference in the body? Trauma, toxins, thoughts. Excellent. Trauma, toxins, thoughts. So we talked about bones out of alignment, Being a chiropractor, we talk about this, bones out of alignment, inflaming the nerves, spinal cord, and that affects the communication from the brain throughout into all the organs of the body. We talked about chemicals in the food, air, water that we eat, drink, and breathe, chemicals in the pharmaceuticals, and then the third trigger, or the third T, what? Stinking thinking, thoughts, right? Okay, we talked about that. So all of these can create an issue. Now, here's the key, and I'm going to kind of lay a foundation before I go more into the cholesterol and the cholesterol-lowering medications and the statin medications. Cholesterol dances with the environmental stressors. So when there are triggers that come at you in the form of those three T's, cholesterol is like a fire extinguisher. It's there to protect you. And so all it is really, it's kind of like when they look at cholesterol, it's kind of like a shadow of what's really going on in the body. So it dances. So in times of higher stress, triggers, inflammation, cholesterol will go up. It's there to protect, and it's an innate response. And then in times of lesser stress, it actually drops. So it actually dances. It fluctuates quite a bit. And the thing that determines your cholesterol level is your liver. Your liver produces cholesterol, and you can go out and eat 25 egg yolks, 25 eggs a day, and if you bring in more cholesterol, your liver is going to make less. It regulates it. And if you bring in less cholesterol, your liver makes more. It actually dances with the environment, and it's really the regulator. It's a thing that makes cholesterol. So you can't really control it externally. Now, if you have a liver problem and toxicity, there are some other scenarios there, but for the most part, it's your liver controlling that. But cholesterol is hugely important. It's there to protect you. It's there to save you in times of excess triggers, inflammatory scenarios. And the bottom line is, medically and physiology, we now know you never want to monkey with cholesterol. It's just not a really good idea because, again, it's an indirect effect of other things going on in the body. Raise your hands thus far if that makes sense. Everybody with me so far? So I'm just laying down a foundation. So in 1990, Dr. Walter Willett of Harvard, and this guy's a renowned scientist, he found that by evaluating the best studies to date, and this guy did and again, this was actually repeated currently, not recently, and he found through what they do meta-analysis. They take like hundreds of studies that have already been done, and they need to review all the literature, hundreds and hundreds of studies, and what they found is that there's no correlation between saturated fat intake, how much you're eating, cholesterol and otherwise, and your risk of heart disease. Subsequent diet studies conducted in 1995 and 1997 found similar results, and those have been, there are even more recent ones that we have as well. So let me go back there for a moment. I think there was maybe, let's see if we got them all in there. Oh. Okay, there we go. There are a couple more on there. Okay. There we go. You actually have to go down to go forward. It's just, you got me backwards here. Okay, so Dr. Bill Castelli, this guy was the lead on, raise your hands if you've ever heard of the Framingham Heart Study. Framingham Heart Study? It's the longest running heart study in human history. So far, it's now like on its 70th or 80th year. And they've collected more data on the heart disease, vascular disease, diabetes than any other study that has ever been done. And this guy was one of the directors. Over the years, of course, they've had many directors or leaders of the study. And he said he analyzed data from a long-term Framingham Heart Study in 1982. Dr. Castelli found that the more saturated fat people ate, the lower their serum cholesterol was. What was it? The lower. Isn't that the opposite of what we've been taught? Anybody a little confused at this point? Okay. So another one right here. European Heart Journal examined 11,500 patients. They found that those with cholesterol levels below 160, watch this, below 160 were more than twice as likely to die than those with higher cholesterol, particularly those over 200. Now, if you've been to the doctor and they've checked your cholesterol, what are they concerned about? If your cholesterol is what? North of 200. And so they want it, and then they actually, the doctors over time, if they do put you on a statin medication, they try to get you, they really want to see it. They'll have the conversation with I really like to see that like under 160. That's really where we want to have it. So the normal cholesterol level, where it was about 30 or 40 years ago, if you're a medical student, you just had graduated from medical school, at that time, 30, 40 years ago roughly, the established like normal cholesterol level was, can anybody guess? 300 to 350, that was the range. That was considered normal. Now, how did it take a nosedive from 350 to now under 200? By the way, it's not just 200. They really want to see like around 160. How did that happen? How did that legally happen? The legislation, that's the only thing that actually created that. That's where those numbers come from. It was legislated to get those numbers in a medical legal document that said that this is standard protocol, this is standard medical procedure, and then that's what happened. The pharmaceutical company said, here we go, and then that was just kind of filtered down to the medical doctors, doctors in general. But again, 160, that's pretty dangerous. What that's showing is that you don't want to lower it, at least you don't want to manipulate. Now, if you had an athlete or a person whose body just naturally had it that low, that's different than taking a cholesterol level that's high and then artificially manipulating, suppressing the number down and shoving it or forcing it into a range. Does that make sense? Because again, what is your cholesterol? Your cholesterol is an adaptive response to environmental stressors. So if you're under a lot of stress by way of one or more of those 3 T's, your cholesterol level is going to do what? It's going to go up. If you have a lot of inflammation in your body, your cholesterol level goes up to protect you. I'll give you one extreme example. With Lyme disease, what happens with Lyme? Has anybody ever heard of Lyme disease? Okay. Pretty serious thing. What happens is the virus starts punching holes. The way the person can die from it, the person who has Lyme, is the Lyme virus punches holes into the cell membrane and it destroys cells that way. And so as an adaptive response, because the cell membrane is made out of cholesterol, what do you think your body innately does? It raises what? Cholesterol to wrap that thing in and fortify it and rewrap it and rewrap it. It's an adaptive response. So what happens to your cholesterol level? It doesn't just go up a little bit. It goes, in some Lyme patients, it goes up what? Significantly. You could easily have a 500, 600, 700 level cholesterol level in that type of patient. So again, it's an adaptive response, and when your body's ready to bring it down, it'll bring it down. That's just the way human physiology works. So again, pushing it artificially low can be devastating, as you're seeing here. And then the last one on here, the National Cancer Institute backed a big study of 12,488 men and women. They found that men with the lowest cholesterol levels were most likely to get cancer. Because again, inflammation, as we saw in that Time magazine cover, which you'll probably see again up here, they said inflammation is at the foundation or the root of what? All sickness and disease, the proliferation, the growth. And that's what cancer grows in. It proliferates most readily and most quickly in inflamed physiology. So we know that if you're artificially pushing down those cholesterol levels with statin drugs, the body cannot adapt properly and normally. And again, if you're going to be growing cancer, it's going to grow much faster because the inflammation is not being controlled. So this is really important to go over. And this is going to really show you how important cholesterol is. So like I mentioned a moment ago, every hormone in the human body is made from cholesterol, but not just cholesterol, the quote-unquote bad cholesterol. So here's how it works. You have HDL and you have LDL cholesterol. Is everybody familiar with those terms, LDL and HDL? So what happens is the liver manufactures cholesterol, and then it hooks it to a protein, LDL, and the LDL carries it into the body to be made into a lot of different things. You also have HDL, quote-unquote, the good cholesterol. It's a protein that grabs cholesterol out of the body, brings it to the liver to be processed out of the body. So LDL, or bad cholesterol, God doesn't make any mistakes. He doesn't make junk. He didn't make a mistake. He makes something bad in our bodies. But of course, many times what happens, it's easier identifying something in the body as an enemy or bad, because then you can go after it. You can wage war on it therapeutically, right? But the bottom line is that the LDL, or bad cholesterol, as it goes to the body, it produces, again, it's involved with producing hormones. It produces bile salts, so you can break down fat, vitamin D, the cell membranes. It makes up pretty much your whole brain. And let's just park on hormones. So you see what happens here. Here's the cholesterol. Cholesterol converts to pregnenolone, which is the parent hormone. It's the most important hormone in the body, and every other hormone is manufactured from pregnenolone. Now, most people have not heard that word, pregnenolone, or that hormone. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of it. Raise your hand if you haven't heard of it. Most of you heard of it last week, right? Now, if I say the word estrogen, how many have heard that word? We all have heard it. Now, the reason why you've heard progesterone and estrogen and testosterone is because, again, a lot of it has to do with the fact that they have drugs that can treat or manipulate those hormones. There is no drug that can manipulate pregnenolone, but it is the master hormone, is the major hormone, and from there, every other hormone is produced. The cascade falls out from there. Does that make sense? Are you guys following me? So what I'm trying to show you is this. You have LDL, that cholesterol, by the way, is LDL, and these hormones, all this is primarily happening in the adrenal glands, the stress glands, yes? Now, some of this is happening also in the gonads, the testes, the ovaries, but primarily in the adrenals. So what you have here is, first, this LDL cholesterol is made into pregnenolone, and then what happens is that actually starts moving down in these different pathways. Eventually, if you go down this pathway, the end is going to be aldosterone. Aldosterone balances, it's responsible for mineral balance in the body. I'm just going to keep it simple. You come down this way. If it goes down this way, this is the stress pathway, cortisol. In normal quantities or normal amounts of stress going on in your body, cortisol helps balance blood sugar. It regulates your heart rate. It actually has a very powerful effect, regulatory effect on your immune system. It does a lot of very important things. And I'm going to come back to that one in just a moment. Then, of course, you have testosterone over here. You have the estrogens. First, it goes from here, shifts over to DHEA. Raise your hands, you ever heard of DHEA? That's a major one, right? So, and there's actually a supplement you can take for that. But then that goes into, there's 3 different forms of estrogen, estradiol being the major one, and then testosterone right there. Now, is that an important pathway? What do you think? And now you guys can see that cholesterol, you can see how important it is, because without cholesterol, none of these hormones can be manufactured. So if you take a statin medication and you lower your cholesterol, what it does is it goes to the liver, whether it's Lipitor, Zetia, Vytorin, whatever. There's a whole bunch of simvastatin. There's a lot of different types of generics and brand name cholesterol medications. It goes to the liver and it shuts down an enzyme. And the enzyme is, the short version is HMG-CoA reductase. And that enzyme is needed to produce cholesterol. So the drugs, they're very powerful. They work really well. The pharmaceutical scientists who make these drugs are brilliant. They know, it's amazing what they know and how they can affect the pathways. And they literally just take that enzyme out and they shut it off. And your liver can no longer manufacture cholesterol. Or if it does, it's going to be a very, very small amount. Are you guys following me so far? Now, there's one small problem. That HMG-CoA reductase enzyme is also needed to make something called CoQ10. Raise your hands if you ever heard of CoQ10. Okay, so that's why they tell you if you do take a statin drug, you want to take CoQ10, because now your body doesn't make CoQ10. CoQ10 is the diesel fuel. It makes your body run. It's actually crucial for your heart. It powers. It's an energy molecule. It's crucial in the energy cycle, energy manufacturing or energy production cycle of the body, primarily in the mitochondria, which is the energy-producing organelle inside of the cell. So you need CoQ10. So now you've cut off the production of cholesterol. You've cut off the production of CoQ10. Does this sound like a disaster brewing? What do you think? Okay, so now you don't have the cholesterol you need here. Now what happens to the production of all these hormones over here? What now happens? Stops, they just drop. And now there's going to be a serious imbalance. So now none of these are really produced well. Now you're going to have, for men, there's going to be a significant deficiency over time. There'll be a significant deficiency of testosterone production. If testosterone goes down in men, that men could actually, by the way, anybody here know that men also have like a postmenopausal type of scenario? Everybody familiar with that? A lot of people aren't, because women talk, men don't, right? But men suffer the same stuff. It's just that men they typically don't talk about their health issues unless they've sliced their carotid and they have blood squirting out, and they're writhing on the ground and they're tapping out right before they die. And then they'll say, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, I have a nick in my carotid. Can someone just give me a transfusion before I bleed out?" But with men, if testosterone tanks, night sweats, hot flashes, they lose muscle mass, they gain weight, they get obese, around the midsection. They lose sex drive. They have a lot of different things that happen. Get very tired. They can get depressed. A lot of things can go wrong with men if that testosterone goes down. So you have that. And then, of course, the estrogen as well. So on the woman's side, if that's not being produced or manufactured in the quantities needed, the same scenario on the woman's side. And then, of course, you have some of these other progesterone. Progesterone is really important for the brain. And that can cause some serious problems if progesterone goes down with a man or woman, because these hormones are in both bodies, male and female. Progesterone, you can get foggy brain, inability to do simple tasks, memories affected, depression, you get inability to do simple things that you can once do. Memory really starts going fast. The brain can get inflamed. It can actually accelerate the growth and development of neurodevelopmental diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and early dementia. So progesterone has a lot to do with a lot, but very heavily linked to what's going on in the brain. So now you got all this stuff going on, going back to the CoQ10 and going back to the cholesterol medication. Some of the leading side effects of the statin medications are what? Decreased cholesterol. And then once you decrease cholesterol, one of the leading things that I see clinically, and 27,000 cases, 22 years at it, I see this all the time with statin meds, that people are complaining about their memories going. They're forgetting things, and they are not really connecting the dots with the timing of the med, but they're having memory issues. Rhabdomyolysis or rhabdomyolysis is unraveling of the muscles. Because what happens also, the cholesterol meds mess with insulin, because the cortisol is directly linked into metabolism and insulin regulation. Insulin regulation gets skewed, blood sugar gets skewed, and now you could actually have diabetic issues going on. But you could have a lot of things that go wrong. So it's also involved with muscle metabolism. So rhabdomyolysis and rhabdomyolysis is literally unraveling on a microscopic level the little filaments, the muscle filaments, myosin and actin. They literally start unraveling. So in your mind, just think like a rope, just kind of everything just fraying and just collapsing. That's what's happening to the muscle fibers on a deep muscle level. So you get deep bone and muscle pain, joint pain. Your legs, your limbs start feeling really heavy while you're taking the medication. People who take these statin medications long-term have a much greater risk of having a heart attack, primarily because all the CoQ10 gets sucked out of the body, and the heart needs a mass quantity of CoQ10 to beat strongly and powerfully. Are you guys with me still? So these are really important considerations. The liver is now affected. It can cause long-term liver damage. It affects other enzymes, not just the HMG-CoA reductase enzyme. There's a lot of things that are skewed across the board. And then we, again, land back here where we have these things. Aldosterone gets thrown off. That's mineral balance. And if you don't have enough of this, or you don't have the right balance of it, if the minerals go off, you can get dizzy, lightheaded, and then your energy is going to go right through the floor if your mineral balance is off. And then, of course, everything I mentioned about here, what can go wrong, and the cortisol. So it makes it even worse if you're on one of those meds and you're experiencing a lot of that third T we talked about, the stress, right? So you're under a constant high level, chronic levels of stress, emotional stress, which have a real physiological effect on the body because your thoughts can release cortisol, yes? Your thoughts can release adrenaline. Your thoughts can release a lot of a cascade of chemicals into the body. So we called it, last week we touched upon this briefly, there's something called pregnenolone-Steele syndrome. Pregnenolone-Steele syndrome. And I know I'm getting a little heavy with this stuff, but I just wanted to give you the biochemistry behind it before we move to the next bit of information. But what happens here is chronic long-term levels of stress release this cascade, and what happens is when you're in fight or flight, and this has to do, by the way, for those who have concerns or would like to learn about infertility, or that's a big topic maybe for them or someone in their household, what happens is when you're under a lot of stress, pregnenolone-Steele syndrome basically says, well, I don't need to reproduce. I don't need to really do much stuff. I need to run for my life. It's fight or flight. Does that make sense? So it's a fight or flight physiology. If you're under a lot of stress, constantly stressing out and flooding your body with these hormones. So what's going to happen And by the way, this is why, part of the reason why like elite teenage athletes or like Olympic athletes, what happens to their cycles? What happens to female high-level athletes? They stop. Part of the reason because their body fat is so low, but the other reason is because the training, stress, pounding their bodies over and over again, it puts them into a constant state of fight or flight. It's an emotional stress. And so their bodies say, well, this stuff, forget about the hormones, the sex hormones, these hormones over here, it literally pours and shunts all its energy into that cortisol pathway. And so it's not concerned with any of the cycling stuff, the female reproductive stuff. It goes straight down into cortisol, and the body starts pumping out cortisol, steals everything. Everything is shunted from that pregnenolone supply straight down into cortisol, and it neglects the production of all the other hormones. Does that make sense? So that's another way that that third T that we talked about last week can affect this pathway. So I wanted to show you mainly on this slide how critical that cholesterol is. And by the way, we talked about the different cogs spinning. Just so you know, in order for this to all happen, because it's mainly happening in the adrenals, you have to have healthy adrenals as well. Your adrenals have to be healthy. So long-term stress can burn out your adrenals and not enable this process to happen. And right there is also something that you need right here to convert cholesterol to pregnenolone. And it's called T3. Does anybody here know what T3 is? That's produced by T4 is produced by the thyroid, and then your liver primarily converts to T3. T3 is the active thyroid hormone. So if your thyroid is not functioning well, and you're not producing the right amount of T4 than T3, you need T3 right here, the thyroid hormone, to convert cholesterol to pregnenolone. So you see, when a doctor looks at your body, every single person sitting here is unique. You're different, and you have different scenarios, and you need someone who can kind of do sleuth work, the CSI work we talked about last week, to look at all the moving parts and pieces. Number one, to identify what is the major concern, what's the major issue that's off balance in regards to the 9 systems or the 9 cogs we showed you last week, and identify, okay, where to start. Where's the big boulder, the big rock? Because for some, it could be right there. Maybe they're not on cholesterol medication, but maybe there's a limiting factor there in the way of thyroid hormone or something else that's required for conversion down this pathway. Now, some of those tests help us identify that. So if we are suspicious of that, we may do, for example, the Dutch test. The Dutch test is the most comprehensive hormone test in the world. There's nothing more comprehensive. It's for men and women, and it actually shows all of these in the test, the different cortisols, the different estrogens, progesterones, and it not only shows you the hormones, but it shows you the intermediate steps, and it can show you, okay, a woman shows up in a doctor's office and they have night sweats, hot flashes, mood swings, headaches, fatigue, depression. What does that woman get? Can anybody guess? You have 100 women who have those symptoms right there. What do they all get? They get what? They all get the same thing, right? So that's fine, but the reason why those symptoms could be happening could be different for each and every one of those women, yes? So there could be a limiting step over here. Maybe there's an enzyme right here that's missing or deficient, not allowing the pathway to continue down. Maybe the problem is up here for that woman. Maybe it's somewhere else. And the Dutch test that you see on here, it's a really powerful test that allows us to turn over a big stone. And many times we could find things that maybe it's the primary issue, or maybe it's a secondary or tertiary issue, but maybe the spine and the nerve system. Maybe there's a vertebral, we call it a subluxation. That really is the main thing inflaming the system, and now the hormones are being affected, and we can actually adjust both at the same time. And likewise, the female hormone panel, the male hormone panel that you see under Access Medical Laboratories, there's some simple ways to start, just like an overview or a global look at looking at those hormones, male looking at a few markers, and then the Dutch at the bottom, Precision Analytical, that's a very in-depth, comprehensive test to really look at not just the hormones, but really looking at the pathways to see what's going on there, to identify your unique needs. What's missing there? What's the limiting step in the issue or with your issue? And we're going to get into the cardiometabolic panel because that's a big part of what we'll be discussing tonight. So good so far? Everything makes sense? How all this is tied together? Going back again, full circle and swinging back here for a moment, but again, I think you guys can all understand how critical cholesterol is and why, if you start manipulating it, it could have devastating, global devastating effects across the board with every function of the human body. So we remember from last week, of course, you guys know that this is a medical fact. The nerve system is what controls, coordinates, harmonizes, directs, orchestrates every single function of the human body. It's your brain that's running everything, including your hormones, including your liver, including your adrenals, including your thyroid. There are nerves that are leaving the spine going to every one of those organs, glands, and tissues, right? We all already know that. So there's one master regulatory organ, and that's right from Gray's Anatomy textbook. So we revisit the slide from last week. Does anybody like this analogy? Pretty cool. For the first timers, there are 9 systems of the human body, and what we're talking about tonight and what we started with last week is that we want to look at all these systems and how they're interacting with each other. The reason why the nerve system's in the middle is the biggest because that's the main player. That's the one that controls it all. However, there can be problems with other systems that can make the nerve system go bad, yes? Right? Because they all need to mesh together. So even one of the smaller systems can mess with the nerve system. So what you have up there is you have the lungs, again, respiratory system, you have the circulatory system, you have the digestive system, the skeletal system, the skin or integumentary system, the largest organ in the body, the endocrine or hormonal system, the immune system, and the muscular system. And all of those need to play well together in order for your body to achieve optimal health, well-being, energy, to have really the health and the quality of life that you want. So let's go ahead and show you how maybe, a situation that can take place. So let's just go back to the endocrine system. You bring that statin medication in, and now you lower the cholesterol, right? So now how can that one medication affect every single cog on that picture right there? They're all linked, right? So now what happens is this. Cortisol, let's just talk about cortisol. Taking a statin medication, now cortisol production goes up or down. If you have less cortisol or less cholesterol to make that cortisol, what happens to cortisol? It regulates your blood pressure. It's a major hormone in blood pressure regulation, blood sugar regulation, metabolism, immune system regulation as well, and some other things along with that. But this is a major player. All those hormones are major players. So now that your cortisol is skewed, what is that going to do to your blood pressure? Now, the fact that your body is not producing the right hormones, your body feels somewhat threatened. The pharmaceutical is now messing with the liver. The body kind of goes into a fight or flight. It feels like it's off kilter. And so what's going to happen is in fight or flight, the nerve system is going to respond, and in lockstep with the endocrine system, the blood pressure is going to elevate, right? And so with that, now, when the blood pressure elevates and you're in fight or flight, what happens to the musculoskeletal system? Does it relax or does it tighten up? It tightens up, right? So you guys are seeing how all these go together. Now that cortisol is skewed, we're just talking about cortisol. We could talk about the other hormones too. Cortisol is skewed. What is that going to do to the immune system? Well, whether it's going down, up, now it's fluctuating all over the place. Cortisol is a major immune system regulator. So what is that going to do to your immune system? All right, everything is connected to everything. And it's not only the nerve system running everything, but it's all these other systems giving feedback to the nerve system. And if that feedback is skewed or off balance, the nerve system is going to get off balance, and then the whole system starts getting off kilter. So all of these are going to be tied together. Now, if the immune system is off kilter, you could develop an immune disease, an autoimmune disease, yes? So now, like we talked about last week, the immune system gets thrown off. Now it goes to attack something, a simple virus or bacteria. Maybe you go outside and you walk under an oak tree. Some pollen falls on you. Well, this person it doesn't affect, but now you, what happens? You have this gigantic histamine response. Your head blows up and your sinuses are filled with fluid and you feel like garbage. It was an overreaction. So that reaction's not calibrated properly because, again, everything's off. So the immune system's off. The immune system doesn't understand really how to calibrate its responses. It goes after, it overreacts, underreacts. And now maybe something is going on with the skin over here, and your immune system thinks, well, I got to just keep attacking it. Something maybe bit you or irritating your skin. But now the immune system, instead of an acute attack, a response, a reaction, now the reaction just keeps going. It doesn't know when to shut off. So now what you do is you have an autoimmune issue with the skin. What does that turn into? Psoriasis or eczema, or some other type of skin issue. So I think you guys are getting the idea how if you really want to regain balance and you want to balance out the total ecology of the body and you really want to get well, you have to get to cause. And the only way to get to cause is to figure out what's going on with these 9 systems. The great thing actually is that there's not 500 systems. There's only 9. Thank goodness, right? And we don't have to guess. We can test. That's the key. And that's the problem when you go to most doctors. They're just guessing randomly, or they're just nearsighted in their approach just because their training was very narrow. They never really they don't look at the body and see how everything's playing together. And that is crucial because everything affects everything. So I wanted to show that to you. I'm going to go ahead and move on. Raise your hands if you're learning anything yet. There's more to come. Okay, cool. Everybody's with me? All right, good. So what damages our nervous system? We're going to revisit this for those of you guys who are coming in this week for the first time. This is what we talked about last week. We have trauma, toxins, and stinking thinking. I don't have a spine with me, but we know that the brain is running everything. Again, what we talked about last week, if the spine moves out of alignment, it could actually interrupt the messages coming through down and out to the organs. You guys know how that works, right? The spine's just running everything. There's a spinal cord, and then there are tributaries, like little rivers running off, electrical rivers running off and bringing life to all the different organs and tissues. It's just how the spine works. So as a chiropractor, I address the spine, Dr. Joe, as well. Many of you guys got a chance to meet Dr. Joe last week. His chiropractic office is in DeBarry, right down the road. I'm based out of Lake Mary. We work together. And a lot of people actually took advantage of that, made an appointment to have their spine checked. But moving through it, again, these are the 3 T's that we talked about. The trauma, mainly pertaining to the spine, subluxations, our bones out of alignment, stressing, inflaming, damaging, weakening the nerves and the nerve supply going out to the organs. That can cause imbalance. Toxins, chemicals, and the medications, food, air, water, food that we eat, breathe, and drink. And then thoughts, thinking. Because you guys already know that what you think can create a negative cascade. Adrenaline, cortisol, all these different things. Yes? So we call these stressors, these 3. These are the 3 things as a clinician, as a doctor, that I look at. Which one is affecting you the most through a very comprehensive intake that we do at the office. We do extensive questionnaires. We do an extensive survey of your health. We look at the spine, x-ray, thermal EMG, heart rate variability. We look at the nerve system, but then we also try to cull as much data as we can from what you know about your body, maybe previous lab tests, things of that nature, not only blood work, but MRIs, CAT scans, all that stuff. And then we figure out what are the overriding stressors, triggers, which cause inflammation. So it all comes back to inflammation. And then removing the causes of these inflammatory reactions. And I talked about last week, foods can be these. We do food allergy testing. That's on the panel as well. Foods, when they come in, as time goes on, that your body can become allergic to them. And yes, there is a food allergy that when you, for example, eat a peanut, people who have very severe ones, their throat can close up. They can go to anaphylactic shock. They take them off to the hospital. Now, that's one type. There are many types of food allergies. But a food allergy as well can be a trigger. We do food allergy testing. I showed you a panel last week, and some people have 10, 20, 30 food allergies, and every time they eat them, their immune system thinks they're being stung by a bee. And their immune system goes after it with fire or inflammation, and that's also a factor. So we try to figure out what is the overriding factor, what are the secondary, tertiary issues, and so forth and so on, and try to identify those, and that's how we start helping folks in our office. So trauma, subluxation, bones out of alignment can be caused by car accidents, sports injuries, sitting at a desk all day, carrying heavy loads, the wrong mattress, sleeping on a couch. You know, all these things, birthing process can do it, carrying heavy loads, can shift the spine out of alignment and create that interference that we're talking about. The way we find that trigger or that stressor is we first start with x-rays. And then we do thermal EMG, heart rate variability, that looks at the energy moving through that system and looks for blockages in the flow through that river. So moving on, we talked about this last week, how we look at the spine, we look at the neck. There's the brain and the spinal cord coming off through the neck. We want to see the position being a smooth curve like that, the cord relaxed. But if your neck on x-ray goes straight, reverse like that, that's very dangerous. It's a very severe stress. It inflames that area, and that can occur with no neck pain. People come in all the time, and they have this massive trigger, this major stress on their cord, but no neck pain. Meanwhile, they have severe stress on that cord. It doesn't always accompany pain or symptoms, primarily because most of those fibers in the spinal cord are dedicated to silent data moving through a function. Only about 10% of the fibers running through there are designated for feeling or sensory. 90% is just silent information moving through in the form of, for example, your brain signaling to your kidneys to filter blood. Can you feel those messages moving through your spine right now? You can't feel that, right? That's the functional data. So many people come in and they have this damage in their neck. They don't even know it, but it is the major trigger inflammatory stressor that's going on. So that's one of the things that we do at our office. We check that. Now, sudden cardiac death is a real thing. One of the things that you may not be able to see here, all the nerves that are coming off the neck dive right into the heart. The heart is literally wrapped in these yellow wires. Those are all the conduits that are leaving the neck, these brachial nerves, and diving and surrounding and wrapping into the heart. And sudden cardiac death is not necessarily a clogging of the arteries of the heart. And many experts say most heart attacks and most deaths from heart attacks, sudden death certainly, is not caused by a blockage. It's caused by what, guys? It's caused by inflammation of those nerves, exactly. So most sudden cardiac deaths are caused by abnormal heart rhythms called arrhythmias. The most common life-threatening arrhythmia is ventricular fibrillation, which is an erratic, disorganized firing of impulses. Those are the messages that are coming through the nerves. How many people here knew that? Most people think just heart attack, right? We have one. Most people think just heart attacks or heart-related issues are just from blockages, right? Many are, but this is not a blockage. This is an electrical shutdown of the heart. So that's really important to understand. Again, if you're concerned about your heart, you definitely want to have those nerves checked. You want to have your spine checked. That's absolutely critical in terms of long-term heart health. Again, revisiting this from last week, we showed this, the secret killer. And it says it's not really a surprising link, but they said it's a surprising link between inflammation and what? Heart attacks, cancer, Alzheimer's, and other diseases, and what you can do to fight it. And they say what you can do to fight it is figure out the source, the root cause of this inflammation, and it really comes down to those 3 T's. So we not only address the spine, we address through testing. We always test, we never guess, whether it's testing the spine with an x-ray, maybe looking at that. And by the way, that's not on here. That test to come in to get the full spinal evaluation, that's only $40 to get that done, to get the spinal workup. For my office, mainly the chiropractic we do over in the DeBerry office, and that will give you a thorough spinal checkup. I should have put that on there again, that's $40. But that's really important to look for the inflammation. But again, it's not only spine. We work with diet, nutrition, but we first test. We don't just indiscriminately or randomly give out supplements or natural things or herbs. We try to figure out, well, what is it that your body really needs? Does that make sense? There are things that, for example, in those estrogen pathways with the hormone tests, if you just indiscriminately give somebody, a woman, something that maybe globally is recommended, that is not necessarily, like, for example, there's a supplement that's kind of like an extract of like broccoli, sulforaphane, and that actually helps push these like pathways through. Or there are like certain like B vitamins that help things move faster in certain directions. And you got to be really careful with that, because that supplement or that herb or that vitamin or whatever, or mineral, may not be right for that person. Does that make sense? So not guessing, because it's your health we're talking about. It's really crucial. So understanding, and then based off the test, we can figure out in that toxin category, maybe what type of dietary help you need, what kind of supplement help you need, what is it that needs to be addressed? Are there heavy metals there? We can test for that if we suspect that. And then the last category, that 3rd T of inflammation, the stinking and thinking, or the thought category, there are ways to actually test the pathways, the stress pathways, check on those hormones, and support the body to be able to better adapt to stress, to mental, emotional stressors. So the only way we can really accurately know what that is and actually how to care for you individually, uniquely, is understanding through testing. So we never guess, we always test, but we have to ultimately look at those 3 T's to identify where's the inflammation, what's causing it, and then we know how to go after that secret killer, right? That silent killer, inflammation. The New England Journal of Medicine the study showed that inflammation, and this is really important because by the way, we can measure this on our cardiometabolic panel. If you're really concerned about your heart, you have a history of heart attack, stroke in your family, and that's like your whole focus, because for many people, like that's all they're focused on. They lost a parent, they may have seen a parent have a heart attack. I mean, like that's consumes their health focus. If that's the case, I'm going to show you the most powerful panel you can do to check on different markers, silent markers. The most powerful marker in that panel which is the cardiometabolic panel, is CRP is the inflammatory marker, C-reactive protein, which is a very accurate predictor for your risk of having a heart attack, dying from a heart attack, or having a stroke, or death from stroke. But the study in New England Journal of Medicine, study showed that inflammation is an independent risk factor for heart disease that is much stronger than any measure of what? So it's not cholesterol they're saying you want to worry about. The pharmaceutical companies tell you that you want to worry about cholesterol. But the medical journals and the science journals say, no, don't worry about cholesterol, because cholesterol just dances with inflammation, right? It's an adaptive response. So it's really the thing you want to focus on and try to do something about is the inflammatory levels in the body. And that's an important distinction and delineation right there. The study found that patients with low, I'll just tell you what that is, that's highly sensitive C-reactive protein. It's a global or systemic inflammatory marker telling you what's going on inside of the arteries, inside of your vascular system, how much inflammation is in the vascular system, and that's not a good place to have inflammation, because what happens is that's where, if there's a lot of inflammation, a lot of fire going on, that's where the cholesterol gets rusted, it gets oxidized, or biological rusting. That's what oxidation is. And then once that cholesterol gets oxidized or rusted, it starts clogging stuff up and doing a lot of bad things to the arteries. But what this continues to say is the study found that patients with low inflammatory markers had fewer heart attacks no matter what their LDL cholesterol, no matter what their bad cholesterol was, no matter what their total cholesterol number was, it didn't matter. They had more heart attacks if their C-reactive protein was elevated regardless of their cholesterol level. So if all your numbers are normal, and by the way, one of the things that statin medications do is they push not only those numbers down, but they can have an anti-inflammatory effect. And that's really where they should have marketed it. But again, it's doing bad things to the liver and to the body. But it does have somewhat of an anti-inflammatory effect in the body. But nonetheless, is that even if all your numbers, your cholesterol numbers, everything looks pristine, but your C-reactive protein is very high, that was more important, and it was a much stronger indicator than anything else that you were in trouble. If it's, in fact, medically, if it's over 3. We like to see that number under 1 on a lab test. But if it's over 3, you're in trouble. We have people coming in who are in good levels like 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, but we could easily measure this. It's a global or systemic marker of inflammation, C-reactive protein. That's what that is. So this is another thing that we do to test the nerve system, the inflammation inside of the nerve system. When the nerve system's inflamed by way of bones out of alignment, subluxation, and inflames, irritates the nerves, what happens is this. You have 2 parts, and I know it's hard to see the colors here, but these are yellow nerves and these are green nerves. Can you guys at least see that from where you guys are up there? So you have 2 different colors here. You have yellow and you have green. So interestingly enough, the way God's created the human body is you have a gas pedal and you have a brake. So some of the nerves are gas pedal nerves, and some of them are brake nerves. Now, the key to balance inside of the nerve system is you want them both playing with one another nicely, because you need gas pedal and brake. You need to get up and go, and you also need to be able to relax. So there needs to be good regulation. There needs to be sharing and regulation there. Now, what happens if the nerve system is inflamed by way of bones out of alignment, subluxation, it'll register on what's called the heart rate variability. That's what this test is. It's a little device that we have in our office. You put your 3 fingers in it. You sit there for 5 minutes. And it actually looks at the balance between gas pedal and brake, sympathetic, parasympathetic, fight or flight, relaxatory. You want to be right there in the middle. This person was way over on the gas pedal side. Were they a little inflamed? What do you think? A little stressed out? So that's one of the studies that we do. We just test, we see what's going on. There's a way to see what's going on inside of there if it's inflamed. And then as we start removing those 3 T's and the inflammatory agents, we actually see that migrate first toward balance. And then, so this is where we'd want to be ideally, a balance between the 2 sides. And then eventually it would migrate as the nerve system gets stronger, the powering the body, it starts migrating back up there toward that bullseye right there. Are you guys with me so far? We don't need a stretch break, do we? Okay, good. Bottom of the, which inning are we at? Okay, so here we go. The Swiss watch principle. We just got about another 10 minutes or so here to go. And just revisiting, now you guys are seeing, yes? Raise your hands if you're seeing how everything affects everything. It's all connected. And the reason why I'm so passionate about everything that I teach, it's not only because many of you guys heard my story last week. I'm not going to repeat it, but my father was sick all those years. That's that's the major reason why I'm passionate about what I do. But the other thing that excites me is I know the clinical formula that we have is so powerful. When you take a patient in, you can look at them this way, and you start troubleshooting, and you really find out what's going on through testing and not guessing, and not just covering up symptoms, but really getting to the core root cause issue. You can help people, and you can not only help them, but you can help them really, really fast and help them regain a quality of health and life they never thought possible. Isn't that exciting? I mean, I love it. And when folks learn about this information, this is why I'm constantly out in the community. This month, I'll be out speaking in a lot of different places, and I love it, even after a full day. I mean, I've been going since 5 in the morning, and I love sharing this information because so many don't have it, or maybe have bits and pieces of it, but don't have the whole picture. You need the whole picture if you really want to be well and stay well and really do everything you want to do in life. So again, this is where it all started, actually, about whatever it was, 60, 70 years ago. 60 years ago, this guy, Ansel Keys, was the guy that came out irresponsibly, and he said what? This guy said, cholesterol is your enemy. Don't eat eggs, don't eat butter, don't eat saturated fat, it's going to kill you. There was really, in fact, no research backing that, and the guy became famous, made it on a time, and so for the next 30 years, 20, 30 years, everybody shunned. Margarine came out, everybody shunned the cholesterol. This whole, nutritional mythology was formed that everybody kind of bought into, including the doctors. And the pharmaceutical companies just came along, and they were just opportunistic, and they said, well, the population's scared enough at this point about cholesterol. Well, let's just go ahead and cater to that need and create a drug. And that's really the thing. It was market demand. And they created a drug to address that, where really that wasn't doing anything to get to the cause. Now, again, this came out in the 80s. Look at that, right? Sausage, bacon, eggs, egg yolks, are those the enemy? No, they're not. Saturated fat is not the enemy. In fact, I'm going to talk about something a little bit. The thing that really messes things up cholesterol-wise, simple sugars, refined sugars. I'm going to show you actually how it messes with the numbers. I'm going to show you the panel in just a moment. And then, of course, this just came out, I believe, in 2014. What does it say? Eat butter. By the way, you need a lot of saturated fat, a lot of good fat for great eyesight. Anybody in? Okay. I eat a lot. I go through. You don't know what to know about the amount of butter that I go through per week. It's pretty psychotic. But thankfully, at the age of 46, my eyes are holding up pretty well. Don't need glasses yet. I'm just waiting every day. But I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best to get the saturated fat in because it has a lot to do with eye health and hormonal health and a lot of other parts of your health. But again, now they say eat butter. Butter's not the problem. So what happened here? It's like a little bipolar there for a little while. But I think the eagle has landed. The nutritional eagle has landed, and I think we have the truth now. And it's refined, processed sugars, and a lot of these other things that go along with what I'll talk about in a moment. But I really want you to see this, that it led to a 53-year global human experiment. We all had been part of this experiment. I grew up on margarine, one molecule short of plastic, so it never goes bad. But then when it goes into your arteries, it makes them really bad. And again, the whole time we should have just been eating what our grandparents, great-grandparents of yesteryear, farmers knew, the stuff that was good for your body. And commercially, for commercial reasons, they made it a nightmare, or they made it, this monster that you should never go near. So an experiment that has had horrendous generational consequences along with the medications they're given for it. Saturated fat recommendations do far more harm than good. Saturated fats not only are essential for proper what? Cellular and hormonal function, which you guys already understand from that pathway. Raise your hands if that pathway helped you understand things a little bit better, right? It's one thing saying, well, the statin drugs, blah, 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 bad maybe, but then it's another thing seeing that pathway, yes? And seeing like everything's manufactured from the cholesterol. So really monkeying with that cascade at the top, maybe short term, okay, I get it. Someone's had open heart surgery, the cardiologist, the cardiac surgeon thinks they need that med, maybe it's life-saving, maybe for whatever reason. Fine, fireman, yes? But we're talking long term, you could see how devastating the effects can be of the med. So again, they also the cholesterol provides a source of concentrated energy in your diet and are anti-inflammatory, and the heart's preferred fuel source is saturated fat. So moving on. Saturated fat, this is a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is basically, it's not a study, it's just it's basically a PhD who just researches as many studies as they can find that have already been done on one topic, and that's what a meta-analysis does. It published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, which included data from 76 studies. Is that a lot of studies? 76 studies and more than 500,000 people, guys. 500,000 people found that those who consume the higher amounts of saturated fat have no more heart disease than those who consume what? So the jury is in, the data is conclusive, and there's no question that keeping fat out or being scared of having saturated fat in your diet is incredibly detrimental. So I'm going to show this, and I wish it was a little clear, but that's okay. I can walk you through it. If anybody wants these slides, they're public domain. I give all my stuff out. So if you request it, one way or another, we'll figure out how to get you any of these. How does that sound? Right? So they're all yours. Every week, if you want the whole library, I'll make them available, and you guys could have the whole set. Because sometimes I move at a good clip. It's hard to take notes or hard to record something you want to reference back. The slides are all yours. So, and then plus you can go back to some of the things you couldn't necessarily see. This is called the Elevation Health. It's really the Elevation Health House of Health, and that's the name of our offices. And what this shows basically are some foods and some supplements that I want to show you nutritionally that can help support the heart, support the vessels, create an anti-inflammatory effect. One of the things that we have up there are avocados. They're very rich in magnesium and minerals in general, potassium and calcium. You have a full day supply of these minerals, and magnesium is the most crucial mineral for heart function. Now, what happens if you do a food allergy test and avocados show up as an extremely reactive food for you? Guess what? Right? So how can I give you this kind of sweeping, generalized nutritional advice, but all the while, every time you put that food in your body, you're like, but I'm eating healthy. I'm a health nut. Everybody around me makes fun of me because that's all I eat is healthy food, right? I stay away from the donuts. I stay away from that. But the person is the sickest person you know. Anybody here know anybody like that, right? Because maybe their body, every time they eat the carrot or the corn or the millet bread from Deland Bakery, or whatever, that they have like a reaction to it. So in general, when I give you a general house of health, avocados are really good. They're chock full of good health, minerals, multivitamins, multiminerals, all that kind of stuff in there. But again, you got to be a little careful, right? So I make these recommendations kind of tongue-in-cheek. So here's the other thing, arginine, spinach, celery, arugula, garlic, kale, and beets have something called arginine. This is an amino acid that actually helps produce nitric oxide. Not nitrous oxide, by the way. Okay. You don't want to put nitrous, not nitrous oxide, nitric oxide. Actually, the makers of Viagra actually patterned it after nitric oxide. So what Viagra does, it actually creates circulation, movement of blood to various parts of your body. And what nitric oxide does is it actually expands, it vasodilates, it opens up the arteries so blood can more effortlessly move through, thus allowing your heart to relax, blood pressure to come down. So these foods are very rich in it. Arugula is most rich. It's the richest arginine or nitric oxide source. Almonds as well. Now what happens again if you do a food allergy test and now almonds show up as an extremely reactive food for you? Probably not a good idea to walk around with a pocket full of almonds to get your nitric oxide Viagra blast throughout the day. It's probably not a good idea to do that, okay? So you have CoQ10. CoQ10, by the way, you could either take a supplement. CoQ10 is also found in the most nutritionally concentrated food, I believe, on planet Earth, sardines. I know when you think of them, you're like, whew, she, right? But sardines they're amazing. You do the nutritional analysis on them. They have omega oils in them. They have CoQ10, the most powerful food, bar none, hands down, for the brain. I know they stink. half the room is probably saying, I'll never eat a sardine in my life. I don't care how healthy it makes me. Pass the donuts. The bottom line is CoQ10 is found in sardines, spinach, egg yolks. By the way, so many great things are found in egg yolks. One of the best first baby foods. I told you guys, we had, a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. The first baby foods that were given, egg yolks, incredibly phosphatidylcholine, all these amazing brain things are in egg yolks. You never want to cut the egg yolk out. It's unbelievably nutritious. So all the bad advice out there, but again, CoQ10, sardines, cold water fish, the acronym is SMASH for omega oils, and I'm going to finish up on the panel here in a moment because I got a little bit more to go. But we have things like, again, sardines, mackerel, anchovies. You have salmon, herring, cod, halibut. These foods all not farm-raised, but the wild caught, all of these that I just named, and again, this is being recorded along with the fact that you'll get the slides, but the acronym that I always use is SMASH. All of these have omega oils. Again, sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, herring. I know these are typically not the common ones reached for, but again, salmon, cod, halibut, those are really good. The deep water, cold water fish. Omega oils are really critical. Omega-3, 6, and 9s. Mainly omega-3 is what you're getting in those, and they're very important for the brain, and they're very important for inflammatory control, hormonal and inflammatory control in the human body. We're going to get to those in a moment, by the way. We have a way of measuring them. Most people have never had their omegas checked. Anybody here ever had an omega check? Omega-3, omega-6, 9 check? I'm going to show you in our heart panel, we check those in the cardiometabolic panel. And it's crucial that that ratio is right. I'm going to tell you what that ratio is in just a moment. So a couple other things that we have here. You have pink salt, minerals, sea salt, 80+ minerals to balance the physiology of the body, the heart health, to keep inflammation low. Very important to have the right amount of minerals. And then you have up here, I'll finish up on garlic and onions. Garlic has the ability in higher concentrations to actually melt plaques, to actually dissolve cholesterol out of the arteries. Onions, highly anti-inflammatory. Garlic and onions, aren't we all happy about that, yes? So please don't come Wednesday nights or Sunday mornings after you've had your sardines and your onions and your garlic. I don't think anybody wants to hear it, including Pastor, okay? So make sure you have it Sunday afternoon and far removed from Sunday morning. So there you have it. There are some other things on there, cacao, coffee, very rich in minerals, which in fact is really good for the heart. Coffee is the most mineral-rich beverage. Again, the heart, vessels, the cardiovascular system needs a lot of minerals to work properly. Black coffee, and you pour tons of creamers and sugars and things like that in there, you create an inflammatory effect. So, sorry. So there's a few more things on there, but we talked about the arginine-producing foods or the nitric oxide-producing food, the omega oils. We talked about the minerals there. We talked about a few different things that I wanted to introduce to you, and we'll talk about more as the weeks go on. Next week, we're going to be getting a lot more into the hormones, the female-male hormonal panel, giving you more information on that. The fourth week is really exciting. We're going to be talking about how to get 20, 30, 40 pounds off your body. We're doing with folks inside of 30, 40 days. And we have the most powerful weight loss strategy and program. Teresa, the Keller family, has been through it. What was the total weight loss with your whole family? A lot? 170 pounds, the whole family took off. And what did you take off individually? 60 pounds on our program. And give her a big hand. She's amazing. And we were unbelievably blessed with her. She's part of our team now, too. So one of your church members here actually helps us run our DeBerry office there and the weight loss program. She's just an absolute godsend. So, but nonetheless, you guys will learn about that week 4. The technologies and the strategies are really powerful and get your body just metabolically revved up in a safe way to really start burning fat, get you into a great place, feeling great. And weight loss is a big part. Having a lean body mass is a really big part of long-term health and well-being, yes? Very, very important. That BMI, that body mass index. You're going to have an opportunity. Also, another thing that I should have included on this testing panel, I said the first thing that was missing is the $40 spinal check. If you want to do that, tonight you talk to Dr. Joe. he can schedule a time. A lot of people before I even got up here were asking me about that. So see Dr. Joe if you want to do that. Teresa is going to help you out with the other tests. And the other thing that's not on here is if you want to get the initial, what we call a BCA, body composition analysis, that has to do with the 4th week. The weight loss, we do that at, we have 4 offices where you can do. The main office where Teresa can do that for you is at the DeBerry office. And that's a short visit. You can learn more about the program. But the BCA, or body composition analysis, there's going to be no fee for that. We're going to give that to you, complimentary, professional courtesy. You can go in. That's normally up to about $100 value. We're going to waive the fee for that so you guys can at least get the BCA, which shows you body mass index, metabolic age, visceral fat rating, body water content. It shows you your body fat percentage, body water percentage, all these very, very important things to look at. There's going to be no cost to that. So those are the 2 things that aren't on here, the body composition analysis and the spinal exam. And for the test panels, tonight if you want to sign up for one of those, see Teresa. For the spinal evaluation, see Dr. Joe. Go ahead and wave your hand real high. That's Dr. Joe Ramirez. And he's the chiropractor out of the DeBerry office. That's where we go. So raise your hand one more time. I don't think everybody saw you. Okay, so there you have it. So we'll go ahead and keep moving. So here's where we're going to finish. We're going to finish up, and I wish you could see this a little bit better, but I'll walk you through it verbally. This is what the cardiometabolic panel looks like. Now, part of what really got me into doing this, and the reason why I'm standing in front of you talking about these and why all of the stuff is integrated into what we do, is because over the years, this has evolved into my healthcare plan. This is what I do to track my own health. This is what I use on my family. When my wife got tested, she just got her food allergy testing redone. My wife, when I check her heart yearly, I do the cardiometabolic panel. So over the years, through exhaustive research, researching all over the world and traveling all over the world and training literally people who are considered the top health experts in the world. And I can say some of those names now and you would instantly know who they are. And I've trained with them seeking and searching for the best way to take care of myself. And I've run these panels on my body. And I track my health with these panels. And the reason why, I know they are the best of the best of the best. They're the most accurate labs that I work with because that's a really important thing, accuracy, because I was always questioning, well, how do I know if that was done properly? How do I know if that blood was handled properly? How do I know if that was not skewed? You know what I'm saying? So there's some labs that are accurate, some that are not. So I've done an exhaustive search for things that not only will help the people I work with, but these are the things I do for my own family. As soon as my children are able to sit still long enough, I'm going to be doing a food allergy test, a blood draw. We're getting our 6-year-old worked up to do it because we get our immune systems from our moms. And if they had food allergies, guess what we also get? So my 6-year-old had her ears pierced. She wanted to do it. I was like a little in shock just because she was just born. I just delivered her. So we took that step. So now like the next step, my wife's like coaching her through it. Okay, now we're just, it's kind of like getting your ears pierced, but it's just like it stings you a little bit. And so far she's falling for it. So we may have that done. But nonetheless, the cardiometabolic panel they do a blood draw. It's a fasting blood draw. If you want to do it, the pricing on there, by the way, is what my office has to pay a cost. There's zero markup. And in fact, there's actually less than zero markup because in my office, if you want to do the cardiometabolic panel, it's anywhere from $115 to $130. Anybody who comes through the door is a new patient. I waive that, and basically it's pure cost. That's what you see on those pages. So it's $90. You do if you want to talk to Teresa, they do a fasting blood draw, 12-hour fast, and the phlebotomist either meets you at the office or they can come to your place of employment or they can come to your house. We have a traveling phlebotomist that works with us, does a blood draw. It takes a week, 2-3 weeks for it to come back. Now, a standard panel looks at what? Cholesterol, triglycerides, HDL, LDL. And maybe the ratio, right? That's what they typically look at. And I don't know, maybe there's a blood sugar marker in there, maybe. It's usually about 4, 5, 6 markers. Our panel, A1C maybe, right? Our panel looks at all of those, A1C, sugar, all that. It looks at all of those and more, 38 markers in total. And it's called the cardiometabolic panel for a reason, because in medicine, we want to know what the sugar status is in relationship to your heart health. The reason why? Most diabetics die of what? Heart attacks and heart disease. So we look at all of those. The main thing you're seeing up there, what I circled that you can't see, is the CRP. So there are three parts, there are three components to this lab test right here. The first part, which goes from here to about here, looks at all the blood sugar markers. It looks at glucose, A1C. It looks at some exotic markers that a lot of people have not ever heard of. It looks at like estimated average glucose. It looks at leptin. It's looking at different angles to make sure that, because in medicine, sometimes you can get your glucose and A1C back and it's fine. But there really is a blood sugar issue. So this panel looks at about 5, 6, 7 different ways of looking at your blood sugar. A1C is a lagging marker, a 90-day marker. So over the last 8 or 12 weeks, what's been going on with your blood sugar? And it's really kind of the gold standard test that's used for that blood sugar. And then as you come down here, it shows you your risk. There's like a line here, it shows your risk, your diabetic risk, low, moderate, high. It's a thick report that comes back, good 20, 25 pages. It has numbers, it has graphs, it shows you extensive data on your heart. So the first part is all blood sugar, including CRP, that inflammatory marker, which you want under what? Does anybody here remember? You want it under 3 medically, but ideally under 1. That's really the best place for it. And then from here down, you have all those LDL and particle numbers. And by the way, the last slide is crucial. I got to show this to you. It's the most important one, so you really understand what we're looking for. So down here, it shows cholesterol, triglycerides, HDL, LDL. But what you really want to see is the fractionated parts of the LDL. That's where you should have concern, or would have concern, if those numbers are out of whack. So I'll explain that on the next slide, but just know this. With LDL, what we're looking for on here, cholesterol level, LDL level, it's somewhat meaningless if you don't look at it within the full context. You have to take LDL and break it down and go into a couple of different markers. There's like remnant LDL. And by the way, once this comes in, I sit down with you for 20, 30 minutes and I go through this with you at the office. So you have LPA, you have lipoprotein B, you have these different markers. These are the problems. So think of it this way, simple analogy for you. You have a basketball, you have a tennis ball, and you have a golf ball. You have a what? Basketball, tennis ball, golf ball. I have a tennis net in front of me. I throw the basketball and I throw the tennis ball against the net. What happens to those two balls? They hit the net and they drop. I take the golf ball and I throw it at that net as hard as I can. What happens? Goes through, right? So in LDL, you have basketball-sized particles, tennis ball-sized particles, and you have golf ball-sized particles. It's the golf balls that are dangerous, because when they're floating through the bloodstream, they're most susceptible to oxidation or rusting from inflammation. And when they rust, here's what happens. Those golf balls, as they're going through the bloodstream, they're very, very small. And they could burrow, think of the blood vessel lining as a tennis net. They easily get through, and they burrow in, and they can cause hardening and clogging of the arteries. And there's 4 markers on that page right there that we look for. And we can tell you they're high. You have a higher risk for atherosclerosis. You have a higher risk for developing a clot, for thrombosis, for a lot of things going on. Your inflammatory markers are high, because we can see it here. And, well, what do you do with that? Well, you can change. There are certain antioxidants to specifically address that. So in that case, maybe you need this, that, or the other thing. You see? There's a way to put what I call like that Kevlar, or that bulletproof vest around those little golf balls as they're floating through. Some of it's genetically related. The small golf ball, LDL, they are not influenced by saturated fat. How do you like them apples? They're not influenced by saturated fat. The dangerous LDL molecules that will clog your arteries and cause strokes and heart attacks are influenced by only one thing. They are a combination of LDL and triglycerides move, they go up from too much sugar, breads, carbohydrates, pastas, rice, grains, things like that. Things that turn into sugar, primarily refined carbohydrates, sodas, high fructose corn syrup. That is the thing that increases the numbers of those golf balls or small particles. Eating more saturated fat only makes the tennis balls and the basketball size, fluffy, large LDL grow. So when you eat saturated fat, the good cholesterol gets more. It grows. When you eat the refined sugars, the bad golf balls increase in number. Does that make sense? So we can measure it, and by the way, the great thing about it, you can control all these numbers through having less inflammation through the spine, because the nervous system directly influences this. You can change diet. There are dietary recommendations that we can give you specifically based upon how to improve those numbers right there. We could also show you supplements that are very specific to each and every one of those markers on there, very specific to the inflammatory marker, very specific to those golf balls, and then the last one over here, the other thing that we look at, by the way, there's one more inflammatory marker here called homocysteine that we look at. Homocysteine is like CRP, and that can also accelerate the inflammatory clogging of the arteries. So the last part of it, and by the way, it gives you a risk for cardiometabolic risk, for heart attack or stroke. It actually evaluates and grades you. And then, again, all these things can be addressed naturally. And then you have the last part, and I'm sorry, I sincerely apologize for you not being able to necessarily read it, but I can just tell you what it says. It's called the omega check. And the omega check is going to look at right here primarily omega-6-3 balance. Who here has heard of omega-3 before, omega-6? So the balance is really important because that balance, which should be about a 4-to-1 ratio, omega-6 to omega-3. Omega-3 are found in like sardines and fish, anti-inflammatory primarily, and omega-6 in grains, in vegetable oils, things like that. Peanuts are really high in omega-6. The thing is you need both of these. So that ratio controls anti-inflammatory hormones and pro-inflammatory. You need both. If you get a splinter and there's bacteria that invades in, you need omega-6 you need a pro-inflammatory response, yes? Acutely. Now, when that ratio is 4-to-1, omega-6, omega-3, your body can actually easily modulate inflammatory levels. But if that ratio goes off, like, for example, some people have like a 9-to-1 ratio, a 15-to-1 ratio, a 20-to-1 ratio, your body's inflammation is never going to come down until that's rectified. And there are ways to do it, either through supplementation, dietary changes, things of that nature. Within the context of heart evaluation, hardly any doctors look at that ratio, and that ratio is critical. It's crucial. It's integral to moving your heart to a healthy place, to moving your cardiovascular health to a healthier place, and just making you a healthier person, and increasing longevity and all that good stuff. Is this making sense? Yes? You guys with me? So those are the things that are looked at. And again, by having these numbers, very powerful information. What's more powerful is you can proactively do something about it naturally without toxifying and poisoning the body. So this is the one that I was just talking about, the lipoprotein particle size. All 4 of these people can have the same exact LDL or bad cholesterol number, all of them. There's 125 or 150, but you know what matters? Not the number. What matters? The one who's at most risk is who? Maria. Because why? Basketball, tennis balls, golf balls. There's more surface area, more places for the free radicals or the oxidation or the rusting of those. They're very easily rusted. They're very easily degraded as they're floating through if your body's highly inflamed. So that was the analogy I gave you before, just to kind of solidify that in your minds. Lipoprotein particle size versus cholesterol. So really, in the grand scheme of things, what's important? Your cholesterol number? Your LDL number? What's important? Your golf balls. Thank you very much. Your particle size, right? So you guys got it. So there you have it. Who should get a cardiometabolic panel? We have it listed there. But the bottom line is it's like if you're over 40, you have gestational diabetes, your HDL is lower than 40, polycystic ovary or ovarian syndrome. That can mean that your CRP could be very high, and if inflammatory levels are dealt with, it's an inflammatory issue. There's a lot of inflammation with POS. And then you have, there's some ethnicities that are much more at risk, blood pressure higher than it should be. And if you have a family history of cardiovascular issues, stroke, I have in my family going back, there is, I a very strong tendency toward clogging of the arteries, a lot of strokes, a lot of heart attacks. My grandfather had 5 heart attacks, 6 strokes before he died. And then my grandmother too. And so I check on this stuff. I mean, I want to know, so I proactively did the panel, and thankfully things look good, and these are different things that you want to check on. I just got a genetic test back that I did. My grandfather I had to take care of. He died from Parkinson's. I watched him just waste away, this awful brain degenerative disease. And I actually inherited one of the recessive genes for that. It was prominent on my test. Now, what does that piece of information do? Does it scare me? Not really. It gives me, it's empowering, yes? So now I was already proactive with my health, but now I can really hone in and say, even though it's a recessive part of my genes, I still want to be overly proactive and search out ways that I can just stay ahead of the game in many ways. And this is just another way of doing that. So raise your hands if you enjoyed tonight's session. Yes? Cool. Please bring others with you next week, because we will tie in some of this, bring it forward. And it's a pleasure being here with you guys. I'm having a blast just sharing with you. I could just feel how hungry you are for the information and to learn ways to get better and get healthier. And if you, again, want to take advantage of the tests, spinal nerve system evaluation, see Dr. Joe tonight. For these special rates that we have in here, okay, if you still have questions about the tests, come see me. I can explain these further. Next week, we're going to get into stool tests, the allergy testing, the hormones. Next week's going to be fascinating. We're going to dive even deeper. Make sure you're here for that one, because it's really going to tie everything else together from the first 2 weeks. If you have questions about these, come see me. I'll stay a little longer. I can answer those for you. If you know which tests you want to get, you definitely want to get the cardiometabolic panel. See Teresa. She'll get you set up. If you want the spinal check again, see Dr. Joe. Yes? General question.
Do you guys have any good luck with insurance for some of these?
Most of the things that we do are out of the insurance system. Okay. Occasionally, it's more of a rarity, or it's more seldom that the insurances will pick these up, because they're usually like, they'll say, it's not necessary unless a doctor says, you need an emergency cardiometabolic panel and it's justified medically. So no, sometimes we can provide like the data on the testing, and some people try to get reimbursement. I just wouldn't count on it. I wouldn't make that the focal point of getting the test. Likewise, a lot of the stuff we do is considered preventive, proactive, even the spinal care, the chiropractic care. Again, sometimes some will help, but most of what we're looking at, it's a kind of a cash type model. But in the long run, what's going to happen is, even if it's out of pocket, what? You save money, right? Because you get better, you get well. It's a lot easier. It's a lot more cost effective staying well than trying to get well or fight for your health or fight for your life, what have you, medical cost wise. So great question. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Absolutely. It is absolutely possible. Someone could have you want acid alkaline balance, but it's really a balance. Like, you don't want to go too alkaline or drink like gallons of alkaline water. I mean, there's a balance, just like with the omega-3 and omega-6, right? There's always a balance. So the more valuable piece of information would be, is your body having issues regulating inflammation? Looking at the CRP, the homocysteine, the omega check, looking at those factors. Those are really more medically conclusive. Yes, sir. Can you just stop taking them? I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend definitely discussing that with your doctor. I've had a lot of patients in your scenario who have had that conversation with their doctors, and their doctors agree, hey, we can move on, we can wean you off, and you're going to be okay. Many times, like I was saying, with the fireman analogy, initially coming off different procedures, the cardiologists say, you got to be on these. But over time, maybe, having that conversation with your cardiologist and seeing what they think. Many will say, you're right, let's go ahead, it's time to move on. Let's see if we can get you on less of a dosage, less medications, or maybe you can, move on and you can live life without them, But that's definitely a good conversation to have with your cardiologist for sure. Yep. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Mark. And you guys have a blessed night. We'll see you next week. And we have some prayer time here for a moment. So, yep. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Dan. That was wonderful. I feel like I've been hit in the face with a fire hose of information. It's the only way I can come up with that. It's absolutely wonderful. Do you feel like you've learned a whole bunch today? Yes, and it is all so good. We do want to invite you to come and join us on Sunday. We have our 9 and our 10:45 a.m. services. Pastor would love to meet with you. He has they have a meet and greet from 10:15 to 10:45 up in the offices. So if you don't have a home church and you're here visiting with us, we'd love to see you on Sunday. We have stuff for the whole family. Let's pray real quick, and then we're going to send you on your way. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity that you've given us to learn about our bodies, to learn truth about health. Lord, we thank you that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that you knit us together. You know every hair on our head. And we ask you to let us use this knowledge to go forward and to be better stewards of everything that you've given us. We thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Now.